Here today with Ryan Groaney of Treeside Capital, who's got 20 mobile home parks across 1,500 lots, pretty much all over the country, right, Ryan?
Yeah, primarily Midwest, Southeast,
Midwest,
um,
Southeast.
and we there's some RV parks in there as well that we've bought over the
Nice.
years. Kind of been in the business for a decent amount of time since I think your first park you ever had. I think you showed us as when you were a broker, and that
Yeah.
story was we went under contract, didn't we? I think we
Yeah.
were.
Yeah. The first park I ever got under contract as a broker was you guys as the buyer. And we went under contract. It seemed like a decent deal. It was like 45 lots, all park owned homes. But which you guys, I think we're going to convert to tenant owned homes is probably
Yeah,
the.
yeah. That's what we're
So
gonna do.
the price seemed good. Everything seemed good. And then you sent the buyer a request for a rent roll,
Yeah,
and the deal blew up. like
Yeah, we showed up
they,
and he wouldn't show us any records. I had never seen anything like it. I was like, "Can we just take pictures?" And he wouldn't show us anything. We walked every single home primarily. I think we walked a lot of them. And he
yeah,
would not give us anything, which was, I guess, contractually, I guess we could have forced him, but sometimes that juice is not worth the squeeze, as you know. It's just
yeah,
beating your head against the wall a lot of times with some of these old guys because what do they care? You sue them into oblivion and they'll just die on you. So,
yeah.
or they just don't care. So, and that was, I don't know if he just was cooking the books and thought he was going to get in trouble or what the deal was, but it was like, it was really strange. And I don't know if that park ever sold. It was Lexington, South Carolina. I think it was called Lexington Mobile Home Park. It was like 50-ish units, something like that.
Yeah, it was. It was a really for me at the time. I was like, "Oh, this is a pretty easy business. I find a deal, a seller. I find a buyer. Here we go." And then immediately, just a train wreck from day one. So it was. But we even drove out there. I mean, I was. That was not something like neither of us really put any effort into. You drove there from South Carolina. It was in Tennessee. I drove there from Colorado to meet with the guy to just figure out like,
That's
hey,
right.
can we just meet in person and get the rent roll or something? But yeah,
Yeah, and that was 2021. I just looked it up. So,
yeah, that's
so
right.
good
That's
deal.
right. But yeah, so what have you guys done since then? You just continued to scale the portfolio and get into mobile home and RV parks and kind of just keep growing it.
Yeah, so that was in 2021. I had been in the business about 5 years of actual ownership, a little bit longer of operations looking for parks. I started the park business in 2015. Kind of stumbled on it. Actually, looked at flipping a mobile home, kind of like Lonnie Scruggs did back in the day. The Wheels on Deals book or Deals on Wheels, whatever the book is. Good book
Yeah.
if you can find it. And at that point, I think we had five or six, I don't know, seven, eight parks, something like that. So yeah, since 2021, 2022, we bought a handful of RV parks. We continue to buy MH, and I actually have not bought a deal sitting here in 25. We have three under contract right now, which it seems like the tide's turning a little bit. Some deals are starting to make sense. People are willing to talk actual numbers, and prices are coming down. Prices are still relatively high relative to what they were, but that's to be, expected with rents kind of going through the roof. The minimum rent in America is probably 350, 400, if not more. One of the first parks I ever bought, lot rent was $90. That park has since we sold it, and then it just got listed again, and the lot rents have gone from 90 to like 350 in a matter of 5 years. And mobile home rents, I don't think they're gonna ever come down. They're not super elastic, but there will be a tipping point as we continue on the inflation scale. That you may see some people reducing lot rents, just depending on what market you're in, because there is a ceiling for that. I don't know what the ceiling is. It's very market specific. The ceiling's still very high. You probably can't even reach it in most markets, because if somebody can't afford a $500,000 home, which I think the medium home price in America is like over 400 now. If you're making $10 an hour, you're not buying that unless you have wealthy parents. So mobile home parks and apartments and some other affordable housing is kind of where you got to be. And it's kind of the last. It's normally the last stop shop for people on disability, Social Security, in retirement, a secondary home potentially, in certain markets like Arizona, Texas, Florida, for retirees. So backing up, yeah, we bought some RV parks, we bought some MHs. We kind of shifted into RVs in 2022 because we built out a list. We started calling. we're getting the same debt that we were getting from that mobile home side. Recourse, 4 or 5% debt, 20, 30% down, and even some good seller financing deals. We closed 7 of them in 22. That is a business disguised as real estate. I don't advise somebody to just buy it and think it's like no toilets, no tenants. There's toilets and tenants, and they will literally leave you half vacant if you don't take care of the park. And people will drive away if they owe you money. So it's a good business. It's just a little bit more operationally intense, more like a hotel than it is a traditional real estate place. So we're kind of shifting gears a little bit back here in 2025. We'll still buy RV parks, but we're mainly focusing on MH. We're not huge infill guys. We're mainly, light value add to heavy value add, but not on the infill. We don't have the infrastructure and the team in the back office to get, 20, 40 homes infilled in a year and sold, right? Because there's like a 3-step approach, right? You got to have the capital, you got to have the time, and you got to have the team, right? To infill is even 5 homes is a lot, right? It's a lot of time to get them new, or go out and produce that many used homes, and then you got to actually set them up and manage all those contractors, and then you have to actually sell it, and then you have to manage the tenants. So it's a long-term approach. Typically, bigger shops or people like that's all they do is infill, and then they sell the park at the end of the day because it's a lot of work. So
to do it quickly, it's expensive. Like a lot of people will hear like, oh, you people just move in, it just there you go, you fill a lot, your mobile home going up in value. It's great when it happens, and if you buy a park like you said with light infill and a couple of organic move-ins is all you need to just put some icing on the cake. That's no big deal. But if you're going into it like the only way you're selling or refinancing is if you get the 10 plus lots filled, that's a different game. So and there's people who specialize in it. It's harder than it looks. That's for sure.
Yeah, been there, done that. And if you have the team for it, once you get enough scale, and that's like kind of your MO, typically what you would do is you would buy your own transport and you would employ your own people. If you have that, you can typically, and you have a back office sales team, that is where kind of the money is right now. If you have that set up, you can buy these parks that are 56% occupied, come in, infill, sell it, and be done within like 12 to 18 months. So
yeah, that's a good way to go. So you got your first park in 2015. So what was that deal like?
I bought my first park in 2017, 2018. So I got into the business in 2015. I had some under contract back then, but I can still speak to so kind of the first deal and kind of what it was and kind of backing up and unwinding the industry 10 years ago when I was 25, 24. I went to the Frank and Dave boot camp back in the day. That was like the only thing out there. Now everybody's got an ebook and a course, right? It's like anything. And there's still some that are good, some that are bad. Theirs was the only thing around. So I spent like $3,000. I went to Austin for like 4 days. I still had a corporate finance job. I built my own database, sent my own mailers, answered my own calls, did all the stuff the hard way. I drove all these parks, talked to all these owners. I spent every waking hour looking for parks. I wanted to get out of my W-2. I knew I was going to operate parks, and that was going to be my kind of like, way out of my W-2 was going to be to, because I didn't have a family, I wasn't married, and I still don't have kids yet. I am married now, but so fast forward to 2017, it was a MHP Academy was the group that I was in, which was Kevin Bupps and Charles Dehart's old educational group. Somebody had a deal under contract. They were looking to wholesale. I think the wholesale fee was like $7,000. It was 70 sites in Fayetteville, North Carolina, on the right side of Fayetteville. I think 50 homes occupied, well water and septic. So like legit crap you don't want. You're told not to buy it. Lot run I think was like $200. So we went in. The well water was contaminated with combined radium 226, 228, which we hired an EPA lawyer who did all that stuff, all the proper due diligence. We knew we could connect to city waters right out front. Tap fee was not that bad. I think it was like $5,000. So anyways, down the road, we closed the park and ended up turning into seller financing. We put like 20% down. Literally 5 guys that I just met off the internet, like in these forums and these groups. Obviously, we had conference calls, met, stuff like that. Got to know them. I emptied my 401k. That was my input into the park. Paid the taxes, bought the park. Had no prior real estate experience. Didn't own a single family house. Didn't own a rental. Didn't know anything really. Bought a 75 unit park in Fayetteville, North Carolina. First transaction. I'm like the asset manager. I'm managing the manager. That's my role. Um, we go in, we repave the roads. We brought in 20 homes. We raised the rent. While we're doing all this, manager has a mental breakdown. At this point, I was living in Cleveland, Ohio. I'd moved to Charleston, so I was within 3 hours of driving, which helped a lot. Manager had a mental breakdown. He just like ghosted me, like the modern dating term, literally just disappeared on me. I like couldn't get a hold of him. I showed up at the park, wasn't there. Months later, I found out he had like mental breakdown and just quit. And he also owned like 7 homes in the park. So I was trying to get lot rent out of him. COVID happened. While all this is going on, I get a call from Chemours, which was a subsidiary of DuPont, or used to be. Basically, there was a class action in Fayetteville that one of their plants polluted the waterways. It was like a $100 million lawsuit. The EPA got involved. Erin Brockovich was like the head attorney, which is the movie that Julia Roberts starred in. She's a real person. So anyways, they tested our water well, tested positive for Gen X. So they then start delivering bottled water to residents. They're like, it's safe to shower, but don't drink it. And we had not converted yet. So long story short, they basically paid for our connection. So we got city water connection for free. They reimbursed us. We repaved the roads. And we were getting ready to refi into Fannie Mae debt, right? It was a great looking park, good asset. We're at like 275 lot rent, still had some room to run. This is when Fayetteville started to explode. Lot rents were 4. I think like market's probably 450 now. Oh, also we had a drive-by shooting in the park. Nobody got shot.
Jesus.
I hired a new manager who was living in one of our park-owned homes. This is during COVID. We had a lot of Hispanic tenants, which they pay in money orders a lot of times, and we were letting them take it to the bank. Well, they shut all the banks down. We had pay lease and rent manager, but we hadn't fully employed it yet. Mind you, this is my first park. And this is like 2020, 2021, so we'd owned it for a few years. I show up one day, like Easter weekend, I think, and I'm knocking on doors. I'm like, why is nobody, like, why are all these delinquent people? Like, it was like 2 months behind. They hand me receipts with the manager's handwriting that they had paid rent. Basically, what had happened was she took money orders, said, I will fill it in, wrote her name on it, went and cashed them. She wasn't there that weekend. I said, I was asking her, what was going on, blah, blah. She acted like nothing happened. I said, all your shit needs to be gone by Monday, or I'm calling the police. She probably stole like 10 grand all in, which was like between like 10 and 20 people. So a significant portion, but it had gone on for like 2 months, right? Maybe not that much. Anyways, I go back the next week. She's gone. I walk in her house. I'm like, what is all... And I always wear pants and boots normally. I'm walking in the house, and I'm like, there is fleas everywhere. My maintenance guy's with me. There was fleas everywhere. So I walk out. I like strip in the street. So there's fleas in the house. She was stealing money. And we were connecting to city water, repaved the roads, brought in homes. We're selling homes. We ended up selling that park for 2.5 in 2021 or 22. I can't remember. So that was my first park, and I was like, wow, mobile home parks are awesome. Fast forward my first 5 deals, that was like that. And that was the industry. Like, there was a lot of room to run. And the reason so many Wall Street people and Wall Street money chased it is because you could buy a park for $1 and sell it for $3 with really doing nothing, right? Fast forward to 2025, the next kind of 10 years in the business is going to be replacing all the infrastructure, replacing all these old homes, and buying deals for $30,000 a pad versus $10,000 a pad, right? Yeah. And there's still going to be, room to run, but it's going to look a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit more professional. Your mom and pops are probably going to be, that's kind of passing on. We have a deal under contract where I have not seen this in a while. The rent roll is handwritten. I've not seen that in quite some time. Most of the time we're buying from like semi-professional investors like you and I, may have a few parks, have a system, have professional books and all that good stuff. So that was my first deal. I mean, I learned a lot in that first deal, and now that I think about it, it's probably more crazy than I'm actually telling out there. I just kind of went with it, but I always wanted to do it, so like it just kind of was like another day to me. Versus some people may, they're hearing this, they're like, I don't want to buy a park, because there are times where you have to physically go there because your manager may quit or you may need to fire them. Now, since then, we'll still buy parks like that, but no manager collects any money in any of our portfolio unless we know about it, right? It's typically one-off situations, mainly in RV parks. Older people want to write checks, right? I say, you tell us, you take it to the bank right away. If we hear about it, you're pretty much gone because we don't put up with taking cash and then not hearing about it.
Right.
That's one of our exceptions. We do not do. And what it does for the managers too is it doesn't put them in a point where they then have to go deposit it and do one more thing, and they forget about it for a couple of weeks, and we're asking them, and we've already marked the rent in the system, and we forget about it. Right? It opens up a lot of worms of people can steal. I mean, you don't want cash in your business. RV parks are a little bit different. MHs, we pretty much don't allow managers to collect rent, and we have since kind of changed the way we manage parks. We don't necessarily require a manager to live on site anymore like we used to. We actually have a manager who oversaw 3 parks for us, kind of all within like a half an hour radius of each other. And it was like 150, 200 sites total across 3 parks. As long as you don't have private utilities, not really, once they're stable, by the 15th of the month, most of the time as long as you're not going to eviction court or selling a bunch of homes, that's when it becomes like a lot more manageable in the day to day, right? The stories of I only spend a few hours a week on it, a few hours a month. That is true because as long as you have everything accessible data wise, like I can run a report right now and I can see every park and who owes what. And if we don't have a plan in place or notes in the history, we're asking the managers because we do weekly meetings. We manage everything. We manage our KPIs. I have something sitting on my desk right now. It's like every week, cash on hand, occupancy, delinquency, income and expenses through a profit and loss to look at. And then any unexpected items or projects we got going on, what's the update, right? That's kind of what we do on a weekly basis. It's very boring. If you own 1 or 2 parks, you may not need to do that on a weekly basis. You can probably, we have more of a team nowadays, right? So, we have 20 to 40 people that work for us on any given day. So there's a lot, and we have thousand plus units that we're managing. So a little bit different of a story than if you had 1 park. So
Yeah, it's easy to get away with 1 park. You can do so much of it yourself, and you can also just remember stuff.
yeah,
Like that's a big thing I found as I started getting multiple properties. Like when somebody called me, it was hard to remember which park they're even at, and the tenants don't always necessarily know that you have multiple properties, and they don't make it easy, to know that. They don't say, hey, this is so-and-so from this property. They're just like, hey, this is Bill. I need this. And you're like, Bill who? Like there's multiple Bills. Nice.
Exactly.
So when you, gotcha. So you started with MH and then you started buying RVs after that. What were some of the biggest contrasts you saw from owning mobile home parks versus owning RV parks?
Say the biggest contrast that we saw was probably the type of tenant and the operational intensity. And number one is probably the income streams, right? So mobile home parks really only have a few drips, right? You got rent, lot rent, you have park on home rent, and then you may have like some single family apartment rent or some ancillary income. And then you can bill back utilities, right? So you have like 4 or 5 income streams. RV parks, I got lot rent or just the rent for the lot. That could be on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or a yearly basis, right? So you have like a bunch of different assets within itself, right? You have transient parks, you have seasonal parks, and you have live-in, long-term, month-to-month parks, right? Extended stay. You also have firewood, a camp store. We have liquor. We sell wine and beer at one. You have a convenience store. We sell propane. We pump people's tanks out. I mean, we have electricity that we own. You have a lot more income streams, and you can make that revenue move a lot quicker than you can with an MH, right? So MH, you pretty much, you got 100 lots. You can pretty much know in year 5 what you're going to be collecting within 10%. As long as you're staying on a plan of, hey, I'm going to raise it 20% a year, 10% a year, whatever you're raising, your pro forma is going to look fairly close on the top line if you're sticking to it, right? There's been some exceptions where we haven't raised rent as aggressively or we've been more aggressive, just depends. RV parks, you can turn that tenant base a lot quicker, and you can also move that needle a lot quicker as well. The shorter the stay, the more revenue you're going to collect, the more people you're going to have. So for every 100 sites we have in MH, let's just assume it's all tenant owned and no private utilities. We have a manager, and you always have a maintenance guy just to fix water leaks or do some stupid stuff like clean up crap or do whatever, right? You always have somebody in the park that can do that. For an RV park, if it's transient, I probably have 10 people that work for us, right? And I'm including the grass cutting guy who you could outsource, but let's just say you cut your own grass, right? You're going to have a tractor. You're going to have a lawn mowing equipment. You're going to have all this stuff. Way more of an asset and way more of a business than the MH is. MH is real estate. RV parks is real estate disguised as, or business disguised as real estate, right? It's more of a hotel play, and you definitely have to manage expectations a lot more. People in RV parks want to be there. People in MH, more times than not, have to be there, right? They want to be there too, but most of the time they have to be there because of the affordable housing aspect of it. Now, with the RV space, you can make a lot more money per site. You can have a 100-site park that makes well over $1 million on the gross side. You probably aren't going to have a park that drives $1 million in the MH unless your lot rent's like $1,000, right? Let's say your lot rent's between $300 and $500. It's going to make $500,000 to $600,000 annually, right? So the numbers are a lot slimmer from like a per site basis. Also, mobile home parks tend to be a little bit more sellable on the back end and a little bit more financeable, but it depends on what type of RV park you're buying. It depends on the area. There's been this trend lately in the last year or two where all these people are buying RV parks, and I think there's going to be a window of opportunity. If you want to buy them, you're kind of missing out right now. The window's closing from all these mom and pops. The barrier to entry is also a lot lower. Texas, they overbuilt RV parks in 2020 to 2025. There's like 20% of, I had a broker tell me today that I think like 25% of the parks that exist in RV parks in Texas have been built within the last 10 years. Wow. Which is MH. I mean, that's not true. There's like
nothing is built, right?
There's like maybe 20 parks nationwide over the last 10 years that have been built. Maybe 50, call it whatever. But it's more existing parks adding on, buying the land next door, redoing parks, stuff like that. So that's the biggest hurdle is you got to understand it's way more operationally intensive. And if you have a full-time job and you have a manager that quits in an MH, you'll be fine. If you have a manager that quits in an RV park, you're screwed. You have to hire somebody immediately or have somebody that can manage day to day, because the people coming and going want things and need things, and you have to take care of the property. MH, people have stuff in their yards. They live there, this and that, right? You enforce the rules, but you can go a couple months. If people got crap in their yard, you'll be all right. As long as rent's getting collected and you're paying your bills, you're fine. RV, if it starts to look bad, people will leave, and they do leave because the competition is a lot more competitive in certain markets. It depends on the market, but RV parks we still like. We're just kind of, I think when everybody's looking at them, I want to go somewhere else, right? That's kind of what we felt in the mobile home park business in 2021. Kind of started to feel it a little bit. We were looking at parks, and it was like, whoa, they're paying what? How are they making that work? Even with 2-3% debt. I mean, you had a lot of 1031s that were going on, and you had a lot of Fannie Mae debt that was like 2-4%. We were getting the same debt in RVs, so we're like, we're buying at a 10 cap. Let's buy an RV park, right? So that's kind of why we made the shift. We've unloaded 2 RV parks recently. We're not like, we don't own these things for life. That's never our goal. And a lot of that stems from the debt cycle, right? What's your debt horizon? That's where all of the industry comes from. I mean, you have people want to recycle their cash. They want to return on their money. But at the end of the day, it's an illiquid investment, and it's not like the stock market, right? Like if you're familiar with the bond market's fairly illiquid. Like you can't just go on the open market and sell your bond. It takes a little bit more time, typically 3 to 7 days to sell a bond. In the stock market or even Bitcoin, right? If that's like you're comparing apples to apples, you can go on, you can sell it pretty much right away. It's almost as liquid as cash. or physical cash that you have in your house or in a bank, right? Up to certain limits. RV and mobile home parks are great assets. They're good hedges against inflation, and they're good assets both in good and bad times. RV parks, like our ultimate thesis was, let's say we have we thought we were headed over a cliff. We might still be. If you own an RV park in a good metro, you can backfill it with affordable housing in certain periods of time because people will live in an RV if they get kicked out of their single family. Or let's say single family continues, the median housing price goes from 400 to like $500,000 or even more. People will live in an RV, and they do. There's like 4 or 5 million Americans that live in RVs full time. And that industry will continue to get more professionalized as we continue, but I don't know what that looks like. I mean, we're kind of shifting back to MH a little bit because I think that's where the opportunity is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months for us.
So the MH side is interesting because obviously, back in the 2015, 2017 timeframe, there were so many mom and pops out there. There are still mom and pops out there. There will be for a decade, because there's just going to be some that just hold out and sell, but there's going to be fewer and fewer of them. Mm-hmm. I've always noticed the business plan on a mom and pop mobile home park is extremely easy, right? They're doing so many things wrong. It's very easy to do enough things right to get your value up. When you start looking at, and you mentioned that you've bought some from smaller operators who I'm guessing are going to do more right than a mom and pop, not everything right. What is your business plan on those kind of parks, and how different is it than it was a few years ago?
Sorry, my headphones cut out. Well, your end of that question was, what's the difference between what?
When you buy a park from a smaller operator who's not a mom and pop, what is the typical difference between that and a mom and pop in terms of your business plan? Like, it might not be as easy as raising rents. Is there more infill that you have to do? Anything like that?
So the traditional, believe it or not, a lot of these professional investors or even non-mom and pop might be worse than mom and pop, because mom and pop are single asset or dual asset owners, and that is their life, right? They've owned it for 40 years. They know all the tenants. They may be so meticulous in who they let in and how they take care of the park. It's actually better than the larger operators. What the larger operators typically do better job of, they bring in newer homes. They typically will replace infrastructure, and they've already raised the rent for you enough to where you don't have to be the bad guy of ripping the Band-Aid off and raising rent $300 over the next 5 years, right? They've probably bought it close to market within 20-30%. Also, their records are a lot better typically, but not all the time. They don't have 2 sets of books, right? Whenever we ask a mom and pop, we're like, hey, I notice your tax return doesn't match your profit and loss. Can we have a conversation? I'm not the IRS. I don't care that you're freaking putting money in your pocket. I don't give a shit. But this has got to be bank financeable, or you got to seller finance it. Also, so that's one of the main differences, right? Most of the time, big operators have clean books, so it makes it a little bit more financeable. They maybe have taken care of the property if mom and pop have gotten older, gotten sick. One of them died, and they just don't care about the park anymore, to where they're milking it, right? There's goods and bads of both, right? I actually think mom and pops typically do a really good job. Very rarely do they do a bad job. If they're still in the business and they're not sick or so old that they can't do anything, because they do care about their asset. They're not going to raise the rent to the highest, right? They're going to leave some meat on the bone for you. They may build back utilities. The only thing with those sometimes you run into just bad fixes on water lines, and they've kind of patched everything together really bad because they don't use professionals. But sometimes if you get the good ones, they don't cut corners. They fix everything correctly. They raise rent, but they don't raise it so high that people can't afford it every month. There's goods and bads to both. Buying from professional investors, you typically know what you're getting because all the records, you have access to their data. You know what they got in there. You know the backstory. They may also have the due diligence file from when they bought the park, so you're getting this extreme amount of history. Versus mom and pop, they're dropping a box on your mail and on your doorstep, and you got to go through all the paperwork, right? And then what they tell you is a lot different than what the rent roll shows, right? We have that right now. We thought it was 50 occupied, and it was like maybe 10 park-owned homes or rent-to-owns. We dig in, it's 42 occupied, lot rent's a lot higher, which is better for us, but we don't know what's going on. But the rent roll's all over the map. And so it's like, and it's handwritten. So it's like, I don't know the history of it. Versus like I can run a report in Rent Manager for the entire time that we've owned it. Anybody that was ever a tenant, I can run it. I can drop the data from what we have into somebody else's system to sync it. So you have all that, right? We're not afraid to raise rent. I don't live there. We raise rent every year. We may not take as well as care as the mom and pop because we typically don't live in the front of the park, and I'm not there every day. Meaning, I don't know these people. I'm not friends with these people. And if I was in their scenario, I probably wouldn't want to raise rent so high that people freaking hate me and they know where I live. Because people are crazy. They'll set your house on fire or knock on your door or do something crazy that you got to end up. Like I'm paranoid, so I'd live in fear. If we can find owners, they can find you. I also tell my professional investor friends that don't be an ass, don't be crazy, right? You can raise rent, but if we can find owners, you don't think they can find you? Somebody might show up at your doorstep or you might run into them. You never know who knows who. Said treat everybody fairly, raise rent, explain what you're doing. If people have a problem, answer their questions. Like, do not be afraid to answer on why you're raising rent. Everything has got right now. You're getting away with it a little bit easier. But prior to 2020, inflation wasn't as crazy, so you can't just say we're raising rent because everything else is going up. Like people understand it now. But back then, it was like you had to justify why you were raising rent, and that's why some states you're seeing some of these rent control introductions, right? Pennsylvania, for example, because there's been these operators that have gone in. I'm not saying it's justified or not. It's an open market. It's a free market. You can raise it to however high you want. But there have been instances where there's been class actions. There's been rent strikes. It does happen. So always keep that in the back of your mind. These people have a choice to pay and they may not pay. So what are you going to do if they don't pay? Do you have enough money to pay every bill and potentially the mortgage if you have mortgage on it versus mom and pop who, pay me when you want, Joe Smo did something for me. I gave him a lot rent credit, or I don't really need the money. I own the park free and clear. I don't owe anybody a dime. I don't care if 10 people don't pay, right? We have bills, we have mortgages. I mean, we have all that stuff that, across multiple parks, and I have staff. So that's one of the major differences is just who you're buying from and the data that you get and the actual, I wouldn't say there's a better or worse operation because I've seen both, right? I've seen some of the biggest investors in the country have horrible operations, horrible collections versus one mom and pop on a 100-site park, 100% collected, like should be in a magazine type of park, and they have great records, right? It's all over the board. I just think you typically get more data if I'm like generalizing statements here from a professional investor, just because they typically have a system. But mom and pops, I will say, typically care more because they live there or they live close, right? So if they're not staring off into the sunset where they're already counting their money, or if life happens, right? The problem is a lot of times what happens is they get 80, 85 years old. One of them dies or gets sick, and then they just cannot focus on the park because their health at that age is so important. And when you're that old, who cares if people don't pay rent? What other bills do you really have? Or, I mean, at that point, you just care about your life and quality of life, right?
Yeah.
So how we look at it is like, I heard somebody say return on headache. What is the return on headache going to be for me to operate this park? And if it's going to be not worth my time because I've already done a number of parks, I don't want to do it. If I'm starting out, like I'm definitely not as gritty. I'm still as gritty, but I'm not as like hungry as what I was from like a perspective of like, you heard stories of like Ryan Naris and Ian when they used to live in mobile homes. I never did that, but I was at my parks very frequently. I don't even want to, I have a hard time traveling now. I don't want to travel. I don't even have kids yet. And I'm not as at my parks as much as what I used to be. And the reason being is, one, I've gotten comfortable and I trust our employees and our people, which comes with time and it comes with kind of getting in the business and knowing the business. So,
yeah. And it's definitely, there's something about the first couple you do that you feel like you're like, man, I'm really making progress here. This is exciting. And you want to be there. And then as you do more and more, the difference between 8 and 7 is not a big change in your life. It's not a big milestone like 1 is. Like 1 is definitely the hardest. That is definitely the hardest deal you'll ever do is park number 1. And then after that, it gets progressively easier, but also progressively less interesting. Like
Exactly.
it's
It's
yeah.
another day, right? It's most of the time it's boring. Like it's most of my days are not very exciting anymore. When you're that first park I described, luckily all that happened. There's always something. Um, you still are an entrepreneur, right? You're still a business owner. Real estate is the simple man's entrepreneurship, if that makes sense. Like it's
Yeah.
not a huge hurdle. You're not losing clients all the time. You're not losing customers. You're not continually marketing. It depends on what type of park you're buying, but real estate is a simpler business where it's like, hey, collect the money, enforce the rules, keep expenses low as much as you can, take care of the asset, and then when you're done with it, leave a little bit on the next, for the next person, just so it looks like it's an opportunity for somebody. Don't milk it so much that like you feel bad. I still think there is an ethical side to real estate. A lot of people don't necessarily think that or don't maybe not agree with me, but I think it can be some, and I'm getting softer, a little bit unethical sometimes when you're going from, let's say market's $500 and your park's at 200. You're ripping it off the band-aid unless it's like a crazy park that just needs it. It can be to me unethical to raise it $300 on these people because they've become accustomed to living that way, and maybe they budgeted their life for living in that park at that amount. I'm not saying you can't do it. I just, that's like a part of me that I always have a tough time like doing that because we've never actually done it. We've raised like $100. I think that's the most we've ever done. I'm not saying people shouldn't do it. I actually think it needs it. We're footing the bill for that because mom and pop did not raise it effectively. So that's part of the downside too of buying from mom and pops. They don't keep up with the times a lot, right? So you're the bad guy with raising rent that much. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done because markets need to be pushed and market rent needs to be brought up because that's the only way you're going to operate these parks for the next 10, 20 years. So you have all these water sewer lines that are freaking, they need, like a 1980s home is 40 years old, right? Let's just discuss that because that's like, I was like the other day I was thinking like, oh, it's a bunch of 80s homes or early 90s homes. It looks good. Nope, that's like almost 40 years old at this point. Those are starting to need to be recycled if they weren't taken care of. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting with the rent raise. And I'm like you. I think the most we've ever done is 100 or a little bit over 100. And even if it's justified, like a lot of times we'll go up $100 and we're still, like you said, 200 or $300 below where we could be. But to me, it's we're not actually using that cash flow to fund the improvements, right? We came in there with the money to do the improvements from extra capital or whatever, you name it. So we don't need it to be that quickly, right? Our end goal is getting the value up. You'll actually, I think, get more value out of the park taking the slow approach and getting the rents up slower because you will be able to continually improve it, and you have tenants that actually appreciate it because they're paying more for a slower
they
increase of
never
what's going
appreciate
on.
it. Who wants bills to go up? Let's be honest, right?
Well,
No
they
one,
appreciate the improvements though. Yeah,
yeah,
they don't appreciate the
yeah,
raise, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's just the part of the business, right? It's. I mean, you just got to get over it and don't be afraid to be aggressive. But I think there's a dark side of the business that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's like there is some. Maybe I'm not saying I'm an ethical person. I'm saying like there is an ethical approach to rent raises within reason, right? But then you could make the argument of it's an open market. We still live in America. They can move, and I agree completely with that. I just don't want to be in the paper, and I don't want somebody showing up my doorstep because I'm paranoid. Because I'm a real estate investor. That's why and I own mobile home parks. Probably why I'm paranoid. Right? We buy those assets because we think the end of time is always here. Sometimes, right? That's the
right.
attraction really to mobile home parks. Is ultimately within downturns, they're going to do well, and during booms, they do well too, right? The only downside of mobile home parks is typically the government, infrastructure, and if everybody in America's income goes to 100 grand, even then, people are going to outspend themselves and they're still going to live in a park. Poor people are always poor. That's a generalization. And my favorite thing is honestly, if it's a starter home or retirement for somebody, people eventually move out because they're like, hey, I built a better life. I'm making more money. I'm stepping up in life, and that's what America is about. Is the step up to gradually maybe buy a single family house if that's their goal, or maybe they want to live in the park forever. I don't care. I'll gladly take the rent. But like your what bettering your life means to me and them or somebody else is completely different. So you never know, right? You never know if that's their dream was to own a mobile home, right? They're owning a home. And I mean, you can't dissuade somebody's dreams, even if you're the park owner. So I know I'm kind of rambling on about that, but that's just kind of, there is this like weird side of the business that a lot of people don't talk about, right? And you still have to get beyond your spreadsheets, beyond your profit and loss, and you still need to see your parks. Even if you don't talk to a single soul in your parks other than your manager, you still need to see them. Typically once or twice a year, sometimes more if it's a more turnaround or you got a manager that you're like kind of iffy about. Because there are times where you have to let go of people, you have to evict people. There is a nasty side of real estate, unfortunately, unless you're a note investor or something triple net lease where it's a little bit more passive. If you're active in real estate, evictions are probably the worst things that can happen. And there are many ways you can try to avoid that. Payment plans, cash for keys, which for your listeners, if they don't know what that is, hey, they owe me 2 months of rent. I pay them a few $100s to sign the title over to me and just leave, right? No eviction, no court fees. Because in most states, if they fight an eviction, you can actually put your legal fees onto their rent. And if they want to stay, they have to pay that. And legal fees, we just did an eviction in Ohio on an apartment. It was $900, the legal fees. And most states, if you own it in an LLC or some type of entity, you have to have legal representation. You cannot do it yourself. Certain states you can, or you can have a manager do it, which those are the states that are really cheap. Ohio and Kentucky and some other states, you have to have legal representation, which can be $500, $600, $1,000, depending on how many times you got to show up in court.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting process, especially with mobile home parks. Like the cash for keys, I think is more, we do it a fair amount. I don't think we've ever actually still gone full length in an eviction to date. And it's because in a cash for keys scenario with a mobile home park, you actually get something. It's not like somebody who's in your apartment and you already own it. You kick them out you can basically just charge it on the back end to the next person by selling them the home, right? Which is what we've done a lot of, and it's a much better way, a much more predictable process than, hey, we're just going to take this to an eviction. One thing we did have, which taught me a lot about paying attention to detail. We had somebody go to the day before an eviction, and they paid us. It might have been in the process at some point, but the tenant paid us $1. They went on Rent Manager and they just paid us $1.
Off. Yeah,
and
learned the lesson too.
Yeah, the judge is like, hey, they made an attempt to pay you, so you got to restart. And it's like, oh my goodness.
I have a title right here. Somebody just mailed me a title because we actually went through with the eviction, but they still mailed me the title. I'm still gonna send them probably like $100 or so, just so they don't come back. But this eviction took 2 years. They owed me $5,000. West Virginia is a weird state on how you do evictions. It's like a 90-day process with tenant-owned homes. We couldn't find the guy. The lawyer filed it wrong the second time. It got thrown out. This and that. There's a long story. Eventually got him, and I said, "Dude, you got 3 options. I pay you to leave. You friggin' leave when I call the sheriff, or you just sign over the title and or I give you a few days and then you leave, right? But you sign the title right now." He chose the hard way, which was maintenance guy changed the locks. The sheriff showed up, said, "Get the hell out." Well, I allowed my manager to give him a couple days to get stuff here and there, but I said, "I'll give you more time if you send me the title." Manager goes in it yesterday, sends me photos of the home. Of course, everything's freaking terrible, but at least I control it now. I have the title. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about titles and how much of a gray area this is, right? Which is, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, we can. So
yeah, it is an interesting one because a lot of times you don't have a title. Like the people who own it don't have a title, and you can't find any of the information on the home because it's been missing for
50
years.
years old. Yeah. So most mobile homes have a couple ways to identify how you actually look at a mobile home, right? It's called the VIN. It's like a car. The VIN on a car is typically on the frame or it's they can scan it. It's right there in the front left, typically on newer cars. Mobile homes are built on frames. They are etched onto the frame, typically front left, front right, not on the hitch, but actually on the frame. They also, inside the mobile home, have what's called a data sheet. The data sheet might be on inside a kitchen cabinet, inside the master bedroom closet, or inside where the water heater is. Sometimes I've seen them there. A lot of times those are paper. They're taped. They're not there anymore, right? Good luck finding it. So now you're like, what do? I don't have the VIN. The person, I evicted them, or I bought this park from the owner. There's no title. It's a gray area. I mean, it honestly really is. And any mobile home park owner who doesn't do what I'm about to say, obviously this is not legal. This is all hypothetical. Let's just go with that, because I don't want, because there is a gray area here, right? So it's very dependent state by state. Every state's different. It is like a car title, but it's not. There are certain states that have their own division for mobile homes, right? They treat them completely different than a car, which a car, you could file an abandoned property, say, hey, this has been on my property. Here's the VIN, because way easier to find. I get a new title within 6 months. Mobile homes, you typically have to evict the tenant, post it in the newspaper or some ad, pay for legal, hold an auction. Then you have to pay the property taxes on the home, the personal property taxes, which most states, cars don't have personal property taxes. Some states do, like South Carolina. Some don't. And you have to wait 30 to 60 days before you can file for an abandoned title. And then you can finally get it, right? If you can find a VIN. If you can't find a VIN, you got to file for a new title, which can take even longer. At the same time, you're fighting off squatters, people that are maybe going in the home, living in it, destruction, right? So here's what actually happens in reality. Let's say it takes 3 months to 6 months to get a new title. It's a decent home. I've evicted the tenant. We make them sign an addendum if we can, like, hey, you've released the home, you're gone, I don't have title. Or it's abandoned when you take over the park. You may be able to get a bill of sale. Some states allow that, most don't. Some do. If you have a bill of sale, always get one. That kind of will hold up in court. Most gray areas, most park owners are going to fix it, rent it, or sell it, right? They're going to sell it on a term that basically says, hey, here's this addendum. I don't have a title to this home. I will help you get it, but in the meantime, it's your home, right? Or you can rent it. Because let's say you have 10 homes that have no titles. Are you really just going to let them sit there and over the course of a year not collect rent and just be a burden and cost you money, right? And you have squatters maybe that are going in every night, destroying it. You got people doing drugs, kids going in it. There's a big liability. I'm not saying do this, but everybody probably has at one point where they've sold a home on a bill of sale and then try to get the title on the back end. Because it can be months or years before you see a title, depending on the state, depending on how bad the home is. But always do a bill of sale. Always that at least will have some paperwork. If somebody shows up and says, I got the title, then you fight it in court. You just have a good lawyer. Because sometimes somebody does own a home that they sold to somebody. You evicted that person thinking it was maybe they were the renter, but somebody may own the home and they want to come collect on it. We've had that happen where they pulled homes out because they actually were the title holders. But we try to wait. We typically wait 60 days if we're going to try to fill it. But most parks, you have high demand, and you don't really want to sink money into a home if you don't have to. But we all know there's a gray area within this, and it sucks. Because you have some homes that are from the 60s and 70s. Good luck collecting, if the tenants moved out, you've had 20 different tenants, unless the owner owned the home, that title is long gone. You try to get a replacement if you can. Have the actual homeowner go to the DMV, get a replacement, and then sign it over to you. But it's a weird business. It's one of the one things I wish they would change to where it'd be like a car title, so it's way more manageable to get a new one.
Yeah, it would be extremely helpful. The problem is they just transact so infrequently. Like cars, people sell them every couple of years. There's probably a lot more demand in the situations where people don't have a title and they don't even know who had it. But I mean, you have somebody who lives in a home and they don't have any next of kin and they die. I mean, what do you do at that point? It's so hard to get stuff tracked. So yeah, it is definitely a gray area.
Yeah, nice. And the other. So, what are some other gray areas in the business that we've kind of been a part of? Oh, the rent to own, the lease option, the rent credit, all that crap, right? So you're gonna run into this scenario, right? You got a home, you got a used home, or you got a typically not new ones because those are financeable. Um, let's say you buy a park, it's got 5 vacant park owned homes, right? Or abandoned homes. Let's say you have a title, right? Let's say that market does not support a cash sale of $10,000 to $20,000. Let's say you're selling it for 20 grand. You're not going to get cash and you don't want to rent it. Do you rent to own it? Do you do a lease option with purchase? Do you do a rent credit, right? What is the actual, or do you actually create a mortgage, which would mean you have to have a mortgage loan originator in order for you as the park owner to hold paper and finance it. If the home is not financeable by a third party, i.e., credit union, Vanderbilt, 21st Mortgage, somebody like that, to where a homeowner can come in, get an actual mortgage on the personal property, and then they just pay you lot rent. We've done them all. We have not done. We've also done a home installment sale, which works as you take a down payment. Theoretically, we've done this. These are all theoretical because every state is different. The reason I say theoretical and the reason every state's different because the Dodd-Frank bill from 2012, if it smells like a loan, looks like a loan, it is a loan, right? You don't want to be in that scenario. And I don't really like if you owned 100 homes in one state that you were trying to sell and you wanted to be the bank, you're better off getting your mortgage loan originator license, creating the paperwork, creating a mortgage, creating a lien on the title. That is all worth it because you're going to get interest across a bigger platform. If you got like 2 homes to sell, you could do rent to own, you could do lease option, you could do a home installment, or you could do a rent credit. Every state has an MHA, Mobile Home Manufactured Housing Association. Call them, ask them what's legal in the state, what do they think on a one-off basis. They'll tell you. They typically have a lawyer on staff, or if you got to spend a little bit of money on a lawyer to create some lease option paperwork or rent to own paperwork, sometimes under a certain threshold, like under 50 grand, there are some carve outs within certain states to where you can do it. I just always advise people don't put interest on these things because when the judge goes to look at that paperwork, they're going to say you're going to have to foreclose on them versus evicting them, right? If it looks more like a lease option and reads like a rental, it's a little bit easier to evict somebody when it comes down to it. Versus if it's a loan, you have to foreclose. Completely separate process, completely different, right? I'm not super well versed in that because I have not done one. But we have evicted people on these home installment, rent credit type situations. Every state's different. The best thing you want to do if you're looking to get rid of rentals, get it off your books as quick as possible. Even if let's say the home's worth 10 grand. That's what it'll trade in cash. Somebody comes to you, hey, I got 7 grand, great credit, good history, good employment. Will you take it? I will take that all day because the $3,000 loss is not worth it on the back end when you just added 30, 40, 50, $60,000 of lot value by selling that home and creating, that market. It should be at market lot rent. If you're selling a new home, new tenant, they don't know what the rent history in that park is. That should be up to market lot rent. And also your 3 grand, you're gonna make it back on the back end by creating a homeowner because that home's not going anywhere.
Right. Yeah, it's a very weird situation for a lot of people not in the industry because I mean I've talked about before giving homes away. In a certain case where it's like, hey, this would just cost us more money to fix and we're comfortable with, and people just cannot wrap their heads around it. It's crazy. But
Exactly.
well,
So
Ryan, I appreciate you taking the time and walking us through some of the insights. I mean, 20 parks in that amount of time, that's pretty impressive. And especially with RV too, because that operationally, I feel like one RV park is like the operations of 4 mobile home parks or something around that.
yeah, it's it's a lot. I mean, there are shout outs to our good managers and our managers on site at our RV parks and some of our other partners that we partnered with over the years because we don't necessarily operate everything. I do want to be clear about that. We operate a majority of our portfolio, but there are some stuff that look. We're open for business, right, Jeff? If you and I had a deal and you're like, "Hey, I'm in Alabama because I think that's where you live. Let's buy it together. Maybe I have some extra cash." We're good with that. We are a little bit more selective nowadays on who we JV with, but we've done syndications, joint ventures, and we've partnered with a lot of people over the years too. And we
Yeah.
also are LPs in our deal or GPs. I mean, we run everything that we are on the loan for. But if we're not on the loan, it can work out. It just depends. And I'm not talking deal structure, but yeah, Jeff, I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad to see you back in the business, and best of luck.
That's right. Appreciate it, man.
You're
Good to see
welcome.
you, Ryan.
You too.
See ya.